I'm here today with Vincent Lee, CEO of Lumiode, and a recent graduate of Columbia's Electrical Engineering Department. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So why don't we start off by, tell us a little bit about what Lumiode is and where the idea came from.
Sure. So Lumiode is a microdisplay company. We make small microdisplays for embedding into glasses or helmets or embedding into projectors. It's a brand new LED technology based on some of the technology we developed here at Columbia.
And so what kind of markets do you see it being useful for when you think about the road ahead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically the markets we're looking at is anywhere that can use a small display that has a really high brightness. So glasses is a natural one where you need a small display embedded into the frame of your glasses to give you a see-through display. The other natural one that we fit into pretty well is in projectors, where you have a small display embedded into your cell phone that can then have a large projected image. So these are kind of the two areas we've been looking at quite a bit, and we've been looking at a whole lot of other areas as well.
Interesting. So when you envision the first application, do you see this being is this in your mind a competitor to something like what Google Glass is trying to do?
So I'd say not a competitor, but probably a component or a piece for it. We're working on not necessarily the whole glasses thing, but actually the display component within the glasses. So not necessarily the Google Glass, but the piece that goes inside the Google Glass to make the display work.
So it could theoretically be something that would be sold to a variety of different companies in the space.
Right. So Google is one that has come out with some devices, and there's a lot of other companies looking to come out with their own devices. And so we can actually go into all of these areas at the same time.
What makes the Lumiode approach different from the way the companies are pursuing this today?
So it really comes down to a fundamental shift in how displays work. We're talking about using something called an emissive display versus something called spatial light modulators. And in technical terms, what that actually means is in a spatial light modulator system, you block a lot of the light that you generate from coming out, and that inherently is inefficient. With an emissive display, which is what we're working on, you don't have that filtering, and so you can get much higher brightnesses and much higher efficiencies.
So for something like glasses, that would be a less power. You therefore need less power in order to power the device.
Right. So it's both less power, which means more battery life, but at the same time, it also means more brightness, which means you can use it in outdoor environments. That's one of the key differences between our technology and others out there today. Is the types of environments that you can use them in and the types of optics you can ultimately integrate them in. So this idea of having see-through optics where you have overlaid augmented reality is something that we see with a few of these concepts, but most of the time you can only really use them indoors, only in areas that have low ambient light. And so we're talking about being able to shift that to any sort of environment, outdoors, indoors, anywhere you need.
Got it. How's the feedback been from your initial customer discussions?
They've been good. We are an early stage startup, so that means that we have a lot of technology development ahead of us. So a lot of our discussions have really been around the technology itself, and then how to pursue the technology going forward. So with a lot of the customer side of things, a lot of them are very interested in seeing where we go and seeing how the technology develops and plays out.
If I remember correctly, you've gone through the Lean Launchpad boot camp program, I think specifically through the NSF I-Corps.
Right.
I know one of the elements of the program is to take emerging companies and force them to go to the rock face, to go talk to the customers.
Right.
How many customers did you end up talking to through that process?
Through that process, we probably talked to something like 90 or 95.
Wow.
So we didn't hit the quoted number as 100 or something like that. I don't know if that's changed at this point. But we talked to quite a few, across a number of different market segments. I mean, one of the main things we tried to do during that program was to figure out exactly where we fit. Where does our technology fit into any sort of need in the market? So we looked at everything from microscopy to biological sciences to photography, and also all the display applications that I talked about. And since then we've been still doing it. So definitely not at the pace that we were doing it during the I-Corps program, but we've been still talking to a lot of people. It's a bit more targeted at this point because we've tried to figure out where all the players are and where we fit.
So a lot of graduate students at the university who have something that they've come up with either alone or in conjunction with their faculty member or their colleagues, have a vision for how things might play out when they launch their company.
Right.
That either because of the technology or because of the customer feedback ends up not exactly being the way things go. Either through the Lean Launchpad program or since then, what were some of the biggest pivots that you've had to face so far?
So I think the biggest pivot may be just in terms of thinking, not so much in terms of the technology itself or the direction. We started the Lean Launchpad program, with the thought of where this could go, with the thought of where, we could be a display product in glasses, in projectors, and this and that. But a big part of our discovery there was, all of the other places. When we started the program, we brainstormed everywhere this could go, and that included a lot of different areas. So just narrowing that down and really figuring that out and figuring out the story behind it, I think, is maybe not a full pivot, but just honing that down to display specifically, and then down to glasses and projection types of displays.
Right. It sounds like a lot of these learnings about what kind of markets this might be relevant to have come in a sort of iterative fashion as you've been growing the company, which has been how many years now?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Are there things that, as you think back to your time in the lab when you were first coming up with the idea and working through the early ideas and prototypes, are there things you wish you'd known then in terms of how this process might evolve, resources you might have taken advantage of?
In terms of the things like customer discovery and trying to figure out market segments and areas, I'm not sure if it can be done much differently other than just doing it. And that's one of the key things to a lot of these programs, is basically forcing the entrepreneur to go out and actually do it. I mean, there's a big force to stay in the lab and try to develop the technology and try to figure out, how all the different pieces will fit. But that's kind of a force on the technical side of things. And a lot of times, from an engineering background, we don't really think much about exactly where the market is or how to make that fit. Even though there's always an application in mind, there's always something in mind that this could go into. But the things like the I-Core program and Lean Launchpad types of programs really forces you to make that jump and make that leap. So I guess the direct answer to your question is no, I don't think we could have done anything drastically different from what we did.
You just got to go talk to the customers.
We just have to, yeah.
Right. So as a PhD graduate and an engineer in particular, do you think there are challenges that PhD students, or PhD graduates, or their faculty advisors encounter when they try to launch a company, sort of life as an entrepreneur versus life as an academic?
I'd say there's two challenges. The first one is talking way too much about technology. It's always fun to talk about technology. It's always fun to talk about how things can evolve and change. And in a lot of cases, it's fun for certain people. So if we talk to other engineers, it's amazing to talk about technology and how to, and why ours is different and all of that. But ultimately, it comes down to, ours is different, but it can give you, these things. So for us, it's higher brightness and higher efficiency. And actually, that took me a long time to learn, is that transition from how the technology works to what the technology can actually do, and actually change. So I'd say that's one main challenge. The second, main challenge is really in juggling the different tasks. So life as I was a PhD student, there was a number of research tasks and possibly teaching and possibly research in different areas. But a lot of those are very similar. So a lot of those are towards a single direction, and you can juggle those easier than what I end up doing now. Now the juggling is really between all the technical tasks that we're working on, the fundraising pieces of it. We're writing grants, so there's the grant pieces of it. And then there's all the administrative side, so the HR, the payroll, and just the accounting pieces of it that you don't ever think about. And I think the challenge really comes in jumping between one to the other. So if in one given day I can do one thing, that's fine. But in one given day, I have to do all 4 of these things, or many more. And so jumping between one and the other, just switching your mind back and forth is a challenge.
Sure, I can imagine. I mean, it's interesting. I just finished reading Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is a fantastic book if you haven't dug into it yet. But it's really great. One of the things he talks about is how especially for people who haven't gone down this path before of launching a company, that the role of CEO or part of the management team in a startup is a very lonely experience, that there's hundreds of decisions to make all the time, and you don't have enough time to gather all the analysis you'd like to do in the way that you would in your sort of mind to approach problems. And then one of the things that can make that easier is having great mentors and great advisors. Have you found it easy to find people who can be helpful in terms of giving you advice? And if so, from where?
So we found a couple of mentors and a couple of people that I talk to on a pretty regular basis. And I think a lot of these just come from personal connections. I mean, it's difficult to find a mentor from somewhere random that you don't know, because you do have to have that trust with a mentor. So most of these have been through personal connections. Chat a couple of times and make sure both parties are interested with the technology and things. And then I guess the next step is to try to set up either some kind of formal relationship or informal relationship to do a meeting a month or a meeting every 2 months or something like that, just to basically data dump and have the mentor try to respond to some of those concerns.
Are there networking events in the city or any of those sort of one of the great things about being in New York these days is there's a well publicized and well recognized explosion of the entrepreneurship community here. Are there particular resources that you found very helpful in New York so far?
I'd say with that, it's the meetup groups. There's the hardware startup meetup. There's the New York Tech meetup. There's augmented reality meetup. So basically, there's a meetup for any area that you're looking at, and usually these meetups are several hundred people large. So you have many people coming to attend, and so it's nice to get a group of like-minded people in a room just to see what happens. And so usually those are quite a lot of fun. I guess the other shout out I'll give is to the Startup Leadership Program, which is a program run in New York and other cities to help train first-time CEOs. And that was actually a very helpful, very helpful experience, both in terms of a network component, peers that are running through the same things, and also just learning all the different pieces to it, and all the administrative tasks and fundraising and pitching and all just everything around across the board.
So pitching is one thing we hear about from entrepreneurs all the time, that they have a vision in their head about what this is going to look like when they first meet the VC. And it's very different from what their experience is in reality. How have those pitches been going for you? What have you learned?
I think usually I try to approach pitches in terms of more of a conversation and discussion and less of a, I'm going to pitch you my technology and my concept. It's a little bit about learning on both ends, right? So the VC is trying to learn what you're doing and see if there's value there for them. And on the entrepreneur side, it's learning about what the VC has invested in and what their comfort level is in terms of risk and in terms of stage of your startup, and trying to find a good fit there.
So it's great that you've decided to keep Lumiode in New York while you're in your growth phases, and I know you spend a lot of time running around in the subway system here.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about why you chose to locate the company in New York, at least for now, and what do you see in the road ahead in terms of what would make you stay here, what might make you leave?
Right. So I think the main decision point for staying in New York is really the network of people that we already know. A big part of it is just knowing people around in the area, having friends that have done similar things, and that actually helps a lot in terms of actually starting a company. Because as you said earlier, in an early stage startup, it's a very lonely sort of area. So if you have friends around you, that helps us pretty significantly. There's always been a big push to move tech companies to San Francisco or the Bay Area, and we've gotten the question over and over again. And I'd say that may or may not be in our future, and that's kind of up in the air. But as we grow, it'll depend on a couple of things. It'll depend on things like facilities. Where can we find the facilities we need to do our work? It'll depend on things like talent. Are people in New York? There's a lot of talented people in New York. Can we find the right pieces of talent to bring onto the company to actually grow to the next phase? And then just in generic space requirements. If we intend to grow the company to 100 people, where can those 100 people go? And is Manhattan necessarily a realistic and a practical way to do that? So there's those kinds of decision points in terms of staying or not staying in New York. For right now, we are happy where we are, and I do travel on the subway a lot. But that's one of the nice things about New York is the ability to hop from place to place very, very quickly. And I can take meetings, uptown in 1 hour, and then downtown in another hour, and then Brooklyn the next, and just hop between one place and another.
Yeah. And you're in an incubator now.
Right.
Which one?
So we are in Urban Future Lab, which is a new incubator started out of the NYU Poly system.
Okay. And life in an incubator is, having the colleagues there seems like a really nice benefit.
Yeah. So definitely, the community that is built around the incubator is a huge benefit. Like I said, it's really about surrounding yourself with people that are doing similar things that you can talk to and get feedback from. And I think that's really a big piece of what the incubator system really does.
Vincent, thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome. No problem.